The Young and the Restless spoilers Monday full September 1-5 to 0-5. As the tension in Genoa City rises, the lines between allies and enemies grow increasingly blurred. Michael Baldwin, ever the loyal player in Victor Newman's sprawling empire, reluctantly agrees to take on a task that feels more like a punishment than a duty, keeping an eye on Kane Ashby. Victor's request is both strategic and personal, fueled by his deep mistrust of Kane's movements within the business world. Kane has always had the potential to destabilize the carefully crafted empire that Victor has spent decades building. And the fact that he's now growing closer to the heart of the Newman family adds an element of unpredictability that Victor cannot afford. Michael knows the risks, the complications of keeping tabs on someone so intricately tied to family loyalties and personal vendettas. But this is Victor Newman. Loyalty is a currency, and it always comes with a price. Michael's task is clear: gather information, keep Kane in check, and, above all, report back without letting on just how deeply he's been compromised by Victor's ever-watchful eye. It's a mission Michael accepts with the cold resignation of a man who knows the cost of doing business with Victor. Meanwhile, another storm brews between Phyllis Summers and Nick Newman, to people whose relationship is as complicated as the corporate chess game they've both been forced to play. The scene is set in a quiet corner of the park, where the cool evening air offers a brief respite from the searing tension that simmers between them. Phyllis, who had long ago ceased to shy away from confrontation, waits for Nick, her emotions barely masked beneath a surface of steely composure. When he arrives, it's clear that the air between them is thick with unspoken truths and unresolved conflict. The first words out of his mouth are sharp, cutting through the quiet as he brings up the sight of her and Kane together at the nightclub the night before. "You and Kane seem to be getting awfully close." Nick's voice is laced with skepticism, but underneath it lies something more: concern, suspicion, maybe even a touch of jealousy. He watches Phyllis carefully, as though testing her reaction, but Phyllis, ever the master of composure, doesn't flinch. "What's your point, Nick?" Phyllis shoots back, her voice tight with restrained irritation. She already knows where this conversation is headed. Nick's accusations have always been more about control than curiosity, and today is no different. "We had a drink, that's all." But Nick, unable to let it go, presses on, his words growing sharper. "So, what? Is it just casual? Or are you really planning to help Kane take down the Newman empire?" He levels her with a gaze that seems to accuse her of much more than what he's asking. The air between them crackles with the weight of all the history they share, the betrayals, the manipulations, the moments when trust seemed like a fleeting thing they both longed for but could never quite reach. Phyllis doesn't immediately respond. She takes a beat, her eyes narrowing as she measures her words carefully. "I don't care about Newman Enterprises, Nick. I don't care about any of your family's businesses. You know that." She lets the words hang in the air like a dare, as if daring him to challenge her further. "What I do care about," she continues, her tone growing more pointed, "is trying to convince Kane not to use that AI software like you wanted." Nick's eyebrows furrow as he processes her statement. "So, you've been working with him on this?" His voice lowers, tinged with frustration. "Did you actually succeed? Did you get him to drop it?" Phyllis shakes her head slowly, a rueful smile touching her lips. "Not exactly. Kane isn't interested in AI anymore. Not the way you think." She leans in, her voice lowering as she speaks, the tension between them palpable. What he's really focused on now is his kids, his family. That's where his priorities are. The words hit Nick like a punch to the gut. Kane Ashby, once a thorn in his side, once a threat to everything the Newmans had built, was no longer concerned with undermining the family business. Instead, he was focused on mending the broken ties with his children. It's a revelation that surprises Nick, even though he can't quite bring himself to acknowledge the humanity in Kane's motives. His kids, Nick repeats, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. That's his focus now. Not taking down Newman Enterprises? Phyllis nods, her eyes hard as she watches Nick's reaction. "Yes, He's more interested in being a father than being a businessman. For once, that's where his heart is. She crosses her arms, her stance defensive, but undeniably confident. So, unless you want me to play some part in this corporate espionage game of yours, you can forget it, Nick. I'm not helping you bring Kane down. Nick is silent for a moment, his mind racing as he processes what Phyllis has said. His eyes lock onto hers, searching for something anything might suggest she's lying, but he finds nothing but resolve in her gaze. The weight of the situation hangs between them, and for the first time in a long while, Nick wonders if Phyllis might be right. Perhaps Kane's priorities have truly shifted. Perhaps there's more to him than the ruthless corporate strategist Nick always believed him to be. Phyllis, Nick says slowly, his voice softer now, as though the confrontation has drained some of the fight from him. You've always been a woman of many contradictions. But this, he gestures vaguely between them, this is something I never expected. Phyllis, her anger momentarily cooled, uncrosses her arms and stands a little straighter. Life's full of surprises. Nick, I'm not the same person I was yesterday, and neither is Kane. The air between them shifts as the conversation winds down. Neither one of them is fully satisfied with the outcome, but both understand the message loud and clear. Phyllis will not be manipulated. Not by Nick, not by anyone. Kane, it seems, will also not be the pawn in Nick's ongoing battle with the Newman Empire. For now, the lines are drawn and the chess pieces are set in motion. But the game is far from over. As Phyllis turns to leave, she throws one last remark over her shoulder, her voice laced with both defiance and resignation. You'll figure it out, Nick. You always do. But next time, maybe try to ask questions before jumping to conclusions. Nick watches her walk away, the weight of her words settling deep within him. There is more at play here than he understands, and Phyllis, as always, has her own game going on. But in this moment, he can't help but feel the sting of betrayal, not just from Phyllis, but from a larger, more complicated world they all inhabit on, where alliances shift, motives are never clear, and trust is a currency that's almost always in short supply. This version captures the emotional tension and escalating drama between Nick and Phyllis, while also diving into the potential ramifications of Kane's shifting priorities and the impact it has on Nick and the Newmans. If you'd like me to expand on specific aspects of their dynamic or tie in more details, just let me know. The tension between Nick and Phyllis reached a boiling point as he glared at her with barely concealed frustration. His words dripped with a mix of disbelief and contempt. You're choosing to side with someone who's targeting me and my family. Nick spat, his voice tightening with every syllable. You're making a mistake. A big one. Phyllis, not one to be easily intimidated, stood her ground, her eyes flashing with defiance. She had heard this from him, Beffernick's need to control, his tendency to manipulate the people around him, especially when it came to the people he loved. This time, she was done with it. You know what, Nick? She shot back, her voice ice cold. You're a real piece of work. I'm tired of you judging me. I'll work with whoever I damn well please. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. She could feel the sting of his disapproval deep in her chest, but the fire of independence and defiance burned brighter. As the silence between them grew thick, Nick's jaw clenched. He had never liked the way Phyllis could stand up to him, never liked the way she made her own decisions regardless of how it affected his carefully controlled world. Phyllis turned away, her anger bubbling just beneath the surface, but Nick couldn't let it go. You're walking down a dangerous path, Phyllis, he said, the threat in his voice unmistakable. But Phyllis didn't respond to that. She walked away from him, each step a testament to the space she was taking back in her own life. And just as Phyllis disappeared from view, Adam Newman entered the scene, his ever-present smirk on his face. He had a way of showing up at just the right moments, often with a comment that could turn any situation into something far more complicated. Is everything all right here, Nick? Adam's voice was teasing, but there was an edge to it, like he was aware of the tension hanging in the air. Nick turned to face his brother, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Just another fight with Phyllis, he muttered, trying to downplay the emotional charge of the situation. I'm sure she's playing for the other team now. She's too damn close to Kane. Adam raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. You don't think it's more complicated than that? He asked, his voice smooth, but carrying an underlying tension. You don't think she's going to make things harder for you? Nick's eyes narrowed. No, Adam. I think she's made her choice. I don't have the patience for her games anymore. Adam leaned in, his voice softening. If she's really as involved with Kane as you say, would you want to find her? For the family's sake? Nick hesitated, the weight of his brother's question pressing down on him. Despite everything, despite all the anger between him and Phyllis, there was still that familial pull. I'll think about it, Nick muttered, already feeling the strain of having to deal with his past while trying to protect the future. At Newman Enterprises, Victor was seated at his desk, his expression as unreadable as ever. His sharp eyes met Michael Baldwin's as they delved into yet another strategy session with higher stakes than ever. Michael, I need you to decide if you're going to keep an eye on Kane for me or not, Victor said, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of authority that demanded action. Michael hesitated for only a moment before replying. I'll do it, but Kane's more unpredictable than we thought. We'll need to play this smart. Just as Michael agreed, the phone rang. It was Kane. Victor motioned for Michael to take the call, his eyes never leaving him. Take the call, Victor said. But remember, this is about controlling the narrative. Kane's only part of the equation. Michael picked up the phone, his focus sharp. Kane's voice was smooth on the other end, calculating, as always. Michael, I've been thinking about our previous talks, Kane said. I'll make you a deal. We'll work together, but I need you to meet me halfway. Let's talk about your salary. I'll double it, if that sounds good to you. Michael's eyes flickered with surprise, but he quickly masked it with professionalism. Double the salary? He asked, incredulous. You must be serious. Kane chuckled softly, his voice cool. I'm always serious, Michael. Just make sure you understand this. If you're going to work with me, we need a united front, and that includes making peace with Phyllis. Michael was taken aback. Phyllis, the woman who had driven so many of his decisions into chaos over the years. But Kane was Retief. He was going to work for Kane. He had to play the game the way Kane saw fit. Fine, Michael said, swallowing his pride. I'll do what I need to do. And so, the deal was set. Michael was now tangled in a web of corporate maneuvers and personal stakes he could barely keep track of, his loyalties already shifting and his integrity being tested. But Victor was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Michael returned to Newman Enterprises after the call, and Victor wasted no time in pressing him for details. So, what's the word on Kane? Victor asked, leaning forward in his chair, his voice measured but with an underlying threat. Michael exhaled slowly. Kane wants to make peace with Phyllis. It seems like he's trying to build a unified front, but I think it's part of his bigger plan. And he's offering me a significant raise. Victor's expression darkened, but he masked it with a calculated smile. If Kane wants Phyllis, then we'll use that. Maybe we can kill two birds with one stone. Michael, we can take down Kane and bring Phyllis into our fold. Michael, ever the strategist, nodded. I'll contact her and see what she's willing to do. This could work for us. Victor smiled. Good, and if she doesn't cooperate, we'll adjust accordingly. But remember, Michael, this is a game of chess, not checkers. We can't let anyone get too comfortable. Later, Michael dialed Phyllis, feeling the weight of his decision with each ring. When she finally answered, he kept his tone professional, though there was an undercurrent of tension. Phyllis, we need to meet, he said. There's something important we need to discuss. Phyllis, never one to back down, agreed. Fine, but only if it's worth my time. Michael, what's this about? Michael replied, it's about Kane. We need to talk about how we can handle this situation. We need to work together for the family's sake. Victor watched the unfolding developments with keen interest. The chessboard had been set, and it was only a matter of time before the pieces began to move. As always, he was 3 steps ahead, knowing that whatever happened next, the power in Genoa City would eventually shift just the way he liked it. This narrative weaves the tension and intrigue between Nick, Phyllis, Kane, Michael, and Victor as they navigate their complicated relationships and business deals. It captures the essence of betrayal, manipulation, and power struggles typical of the young and the restless. Let me know if you want to dive deeper into any specific character dynamics or plot twists. The sun had long since set, casting an eerie calm over the Abbott mansion. The silence of the house was broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustling of the curtains. Sally walked through the front door, her heart heavy with the weight of the recent events that had been haunting her. She had always trusted Billy, but lately, something had shifted, was no longer the man she had stood by, and that realization was tearing at her from the inside. She called his name, but there was no answer. As she walked further into the living room, her eyes were drawn to the figure slumped on the couch. Billy lay motionless, his face pale and his body barely moving. A sense of dread filled her chest as she rushed to his side. "Billy," Sally said urgently, her voice trembling. She shook him lightly, but it took a moment for him to stir. His eyes slowly opened, as if he was emerging from a dream, his gaze unfocused and distant. "Just a dream," Billy muttered groggily, blinking in confusion as he looked around the room. "You're always dreaming," Sally replied, her voice tinged with frustration, but there was an undertone of concern. She gently helped him sit up, her hand on his shoulder, trying to steady him. Billy rubbed his eyes, still dazed. "Sally, are you still angry with me?" Sally exhaled sharply, her hands now on her hips as she stood in front of him. "I'm not angry, Billy. I'm worried. I just need some time to think about everything," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I can't let you keep going down this path." "I won't." Billy's expression darkened, and his posture became rigid. "This isn't the time to play it safe, Sally. We don't have the luxury of that anymore." His voice was low, almost urgent, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Sally stared at him, her brow furrowed as she crossed her arms over her chest. "I've always been by your side, Billy," she said, her voice a mixture of tenderness and frustration. "Even when it made me uncomfortable, even when I knew it was risky. But we've been doing this for so long now. We've been putting everything we have into these endless games, and I'm starting to wonder if it's even worth it." Billy's eyes softened for a brief moment as he reached out, touching her arm gently. "Sally, we can both have what we want. I can run for chancellor, and you can take your place at Abbott," he said, his voice carrying a hopeful edge, but Sally wasn't buying it. Sally shook her head, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "We have each other, Billy. We have our partnership, and that's all we need, don't you think? We don't need to keep playing these games with people who only care about power and control." But Billy, ever the stubborn one, wasn't ready to let go of the dream he had built in his mind. "I wish you could be more flexible, Sally," he said, his tone a little bitter. "Chancellor Industries is counting on me to work with Kane. I can't back out now." Sally's heart sank as she listened to him. She had heard this before, but it never stopped the ache that settled in her chest when Billy prioritized his ambitions over their shared future. "I've already given up so much to be here with you," she said softly, almost as if to herself. "I've sacrificed so much to help you build this company, this dream of yours. And now you're telling me it's not enough?" Billy shifted uncomfortably on the couch, the weight of her words sinking in. He knew how much she had invested in their shared vision, how much she had given up to be by his side. But even that wasn't enough to sway him. "We both want the same thing, Sally. We both want to take down Victor Newman," Billy said, his voice firm, but there was a coldness to it that unsettled her. Sally's face softened, her eyes filled with a mix of love and pain. "I've given everything for this, Billy. I've been there with you every step of the way, even when people told me I was making a mistake," she said, her voice quivering slightly. But now you're putting your obsession with Victor above everything else. I'm scared, Billy. I'm scared of what you're doing, and you're not listening to me." Billy's expression hardened once more as he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I've got it under control," he said, his voice low and confident. "I'm not going to use Kane's AI, but I am going to use something else. I'm going to use the threat of cyber warfare to force Victor into handing over Chancellor. He won't have a choice." Sally felt the air leave her lungs as she processed his words. Cyber warfare? It was reckless, dangerous, and could bring everything crashing down if he wasn't careful. "Billy, this is insane. You're playing with fire, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you burn everything down." Billy's face twisted in frustration as he stood up, his hands running through his hair. "I've lost everything, Sally. I've fought for this, and I can't just walk away now. I'm doing this for us, for our future." But Sally wasn't convinced. "Billy, we've already lost so much. You're so focused on destroying Victor that you're willing to sacrifice everything we've worked for. And I'm not going to let you drag me down with you." Billy's shoulders slumped, the weight of their argument taking its toll. "I don't want to drag you down, Sally, but I can't just let Victor win. He's been controlling everything for so long, and I'm not going to let him do it anymore.